All right, guys, I just wanted to go over how to use the charcoal tools that you have for this class, because I think that one of the things that people get confused about is when to use Vine and when to use compressed charcoal. So what we're going to do, I just have this really quick sketch done, and I used my Vine charcoal, and that's the softer, lighter charcoal. Now, one of the things that you can do with Vine is you can just do the whole sketch and you really don't need to erase. Because if you don't like something, you can kind of wipe it all away and just work it into the drawing. It'll just become part of the overall tone. You can't do that with compressed charcoal. So we want to start out in the drawing with our Vine. And you know, Vine's very soft, it's very forgiving. You can do a lot with it. And the thing that I've done here is just I've sketched in this bowl. It's a little bit out of view. I don't think you guys can see it. But I can keep going in and just kind of cleaning it up and refining the edges until I'm happy with the initial lay-in for this drawing. I've also included a shape for the cast shadow, and I filled that shape in with the Vine charcoal. Kind of rub that in a little bit. You can't get a very dark value with Vine, and you can't get a really nice detailed edge. So that is where you want to switch to your compressed charcoal. But first, what I want to do is just generally lay in the big shadow shapes that I'm seeing up here. And I kind of want a little tone even over here on the light side, so I'll just use the flat side of that Vine charcoal. And just kind of rub it in. So ideally, you want to have tone over all of your drawing, with the exception of the lightest highlights. And you know, I'll kind of just erase those out later. I don't want to go too dark in areas that are going to be light, but a really soft, light tone is fine. So you can see like the initial shape of the drawing is here, the composition's here, the big lights and darks are in. And maybe, you know, if I had a lot of time, I'd go and refine the ellipse here a little bit, just clean up edges. You could even take your kneaded eraser here, just kind of pull that around to clean it, and maybe just go in and clean up any edge that would help to define the ellipse of the bowl a little bit better, or anything else you wanted to change in the drawing at this point. But in the interest of time, I'm going to switch to my compressed charcoal. This is a much denser piece of charcoal, and it gets very dark and it doesn't rub in as much. So one of the things you can do with this is take a little sandpaper block and sharpen it to a point. You can also use charcoal pencils, although those are not required. So I kind of like to use this because you have the option of doing larger marks by turning it on its side. So now I'm going to look at the setup, and I see that the cast shadow is a very dark part of the drawing. So I want to go in here and really begin to work on getting a sharp, crisp edge between the cast shadow and the bowl, just like I'm kind of seeing it. And then I'm just kind of making some marks that as I move away from the bowl, I lighten up the pressure on this compressed charcoal. And I'm using a pretty textured paper, so I'm just going to rub it in a little bit to have a consistent value. So you can see that really separated the shadow from the bowl. And now I'm going to go in and maybe just refine this edge a little bit. And I want to move away from working with line at this point. I just want to use values. So as I work on the edge, I want to make sure that the shadow moves into that form of the bowl. So you could see I'm going a lot slower than I did with the initial lay-in with that Vine charcoal. And that's what you want to do. You can kind of do the initial sketch with some gestural marks, and you can be pretty spontaneous with it. But as you work on refining your drawing and adding detail, especially with something so permanent as the compressed charcoal, you really want to slow down a little bit and just observe the setup to make sure that you're recording accurately what you're seeing. And you can really go quite light and very slowly with the compressed charcoal. Okay, just to add a little bit of a lighter tone. So a lot of it has to do with the pressure that you're applying to the drawing material. And then you can also kind of just, rub that in. One other tip I have for you is that if you've used compressed charcoal and it looks a little spotty and you want to kind of unify things, take your vine again and just go over it. So you can kind of switch back and forth, it doesn't have to be like once you put the vine down, that's it for the vine. You can kind of switch around and go back and forth depending on, what you need to do with the drawing. This bowl has like this darker stripe around the top. Now I'm working with vine, and maybe I want to pick out that back edge a little bit, so I'll go into the background here and begin at the edge, and then I'm using the compressed here, and I'll just slowly bring that tone, that shading, away from the edge and into the background. So you can really get a very sharp edge with a piece of compressed charcoal. So you really want to incorporate that into your work. Now you have a couple of other tools to try here, and those are your erasers. So what I did here with the background tone, I made that very dark. I do want to go in and lighten up the edge a little bit of the bowl right against that dark background, okay? And you can keep just working back and forth with your eraser, your compressed, and your vine, but you really want to switch that around to make sure that you are, getting enough detail, enough overall value and tone. You could really refine it. One other thing you can do is you can actually blend with your erasers. So I'm just going into a very dark area here and pushing the charcoal around. What if I wanted to kind of soften some of the texture in this side of the bowl, the shadow side of the bowl? I can do that with the eraser. Now it does tend to lighten it a little bit, so you have to be prepared to work back and forth. Bring back your compressed charcoal, refine the edge, but you can see it's getting a much smoother quality to the surface here. And that's kind of what I was going for. So, generally the thing to do is to really get these tools out and on a piece of scratch paper, just experiment with how you're going to use the tools and to create a range of values, edges, and transitions between values. All right, so I hope this helps, and if you guys have questions, let me know.